Rahim. You are tuned into the Phenomenal Woman Show here on IFM 88.3 with me, Bibi Ayesha Laher. Remember, our beloved sisters, you are welcome to call or WhatsApp call us on 067 2363487, or you may call us on the landline 041 457 1269. So today a very, very pertinent topic, something that needed to be done a long time ago, something that a lot of women have requested for, and something that me, myself, as a person, as an educator, as a life coach, as a motivational speaker, is something that I have tried to teach the people that I have interacted with, the people that I have coached, the importance of setting boundaries. Now, when we talk about boundaries, often people are upset in the sense that a person is setting boundaries. Is this person being difficult? Is this person being selfish? Is this person trying to break family ties and work ties and relationship ties? Is this person a prude? Is this person all of a sudden trying to come and dominate and change things in work environments or school environments or whatever? But the truth is, my beloved sisters, we need to empower ourselves on boundaries, because you are the madrasa for your child. Your lap is the madrasa for your child. And setting boundaries is actually a sunnah of our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not some fancy term created by women empowerment and people wanting to create problems. It is something that has been practiced by our Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is something that Quran teaches us. Boundaries are setting rules on the way you deserve to be treated in every sense of your being. Boundaries is a reminder that there is etiquette, there are rules, and there are certain ways in which things need to be handled in order for there to be healthy relationships and healthy atmosphere and environment all around. Often we get very caught up in our lives and we do take people for granted. And the sad thing is, in my coaching sessions, when I'm coaching women, a lot of them will tell me, my boss doesn't respect me, or my children don't respect me, or my friends don't respect me. My sister, you have set the tone. You have set the tone for the way they must treat you. People treat you by the way you treat yourself. If you have not set boundaries for yourself, if you have not said to yourself that in my life, this is what I will be able to deal with, in my life, this is a non-negotiable, people will not respect you. A lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. Firstly, creating boundaries for your personal self-growth. Then secondly, creating boundaries in every other relationship in your life. Every other relationship in your life being your role as a mother, there are boundaries. As a wife, as an ex-wife, as a daughter, as an aunt, as a grandmother, as a neighbor, as a colleague, as a boss, as a friend. In every aspect and relationship in your life, there has to be a set of boundaries. You cannot just walk into somebody's house without announcing yourself and asking permission. That is a sunnah. You cannot, as a boss, just demand something from the people that work from you. That is a sunnah. You speak to them with kindness. There's no sense of entitlement. There's no sense of I will because it's mine. I will. There's no such thing, especially not in Islam. There is respect for other people's space. There is respect for other people's needs. There is respect for oneself. If we respect ourselves, we will respect other people. And in the upbringing of children, if we have these boundaries in place for us firstly as a mother, that is exactly how you are going to bring up your children. And when your children grow up, they are going to bring up their children in that way. And it's a ripple effect. So inshallah, as we get more involved into the conversation, we will be discussing how to set boundaries in every aspect of your life, in every relationship. And the person who is going to help us with this is someone who is a dear friend to me, someone who's very empowered, Zaid Ismail. So Zaid is an author, he's an activist, he's an entrepreneur, he's an editor, he's a designer, and he's also a life coach who is based in Johannesburg, Gauteng. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Zaid Ismail, and welcome to Phenomenal Woman.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me on your show, and I'm hoping I can do justice to this platform for women.
I mean, like I said, the motto of Phenomenal Woman is to educate, empower, inspire, and motivate women from all walks of life. Because again, like I said earlier, a woman is the child's very first madrasa. So when it comes to boundaries, like I mentioned in my opening statement, it's not some newfound new age term. It's basically sunnah and respecting Quran and respect for oneself. Do you agree?
Absolutely. In fact, I would go even beyond that and saying that we can't avoid setting boundaries. We just need to realize what boundaries we're setting.
I just have to mention a very, a story that I was discussing with somebody earlier this morning. I remember some time ago, I heard one of our very learned, respected alims had a talk, and this person mentioned that a parent came up to him and told him, I have a child who's so and so years old. This child's a grown man, as an adult, and this child, this man, has very bad ways, and he's always asking me for money. He's always broke. He's not good in his relationships with his family, with his wife, with his children. What is wrong with him? What do I do? And this alim's reply was, so how old is your child? And the man mentioned it was 20-something. So he says, for 20-something years, you couldn't get this right, and you're coming to me to help fix it in one day. Lots to think about there. Very, very powerful comments. So yes. I think that would set the tone for our conversation today.
Yes.
If you can, please define what are boundaries.
Okay. In my simplistic view of it, I believe that a boundary is what we decide we are willing to accept from others. And it's really that simple. I know people are waiting for something that's a bit more philosophical and more deeper than that, but it literally is that. What we are willing to accept is based on what we believe we deserve. And what we believe we deserve is based on what we think of ourselves. And what we think of ourselves is based on our self-worth. That is the value we place in who we are. And that's where it all starts, because we're so focused on how everyone else values us that we don't realize that we don't value ourselves often enough, which is why we allow unhealthy boundaries to develop.
Absolutely. A very common saying you read it so often on social media platforms, a lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect.
Yes.
Please elaborate.
I agree, but coming back to my opening comment about boundaries, we need to realize that we're always setting boundaries.
Yes.
When we're not aware of the boundaries that we're setting, that's when we allow people into spaces that we are uncomfortable with or that is not good for us, but we don't realize that that's the boundary we set for them, and that's why we then end up blaming them for how it is that they are treating us.
Absolutely. Another common thing is when we all have been through this. People would come to you and tell you, what, you've changed. Of course we have. We're human beings. Change is inevitable. You have to change. When you're a child, you're going to change into a teenager. When you're a teenager, you're going to change into an adult.
Right.
You're going to change. Life makes you change. There's death, there's divorce, there's loss of job, there's loss of income, there's relocation, there's marriage, there's death of a parent, there's a new job opportunity, there's illness, there's injury. Obviously, you're going to change. All these experiences are life-changing. You're going to change, but you have a choice that you will either change for the better or you'll change for the worse. And this change is a change for you. If you change for the better and somebody is upset about it, then that's their problem.
Yes, and usually when we tell someone that you've changed, or when someone tells us that we've changed, they're actually not completing that statement. Because I think what they meant to say, or what we even mean to say when we say that, is that you've changed towards me.
Yeah.
And we make it about us. We don't understand that if someone else has changed, if we were genuinely concerned about them. We would want to understand what it is that they've experienced that has caused them to be different from who we know them to be. And that immediately brings us to, again, that beautiful hadith that says that a believer is one who wants for their brother what they want for themselves. So if we genuinely want others to be concerned about who we are and to appreciate what it is that we're going through, we need to return the favor. And that's how we set boundaries. When we don't return that favor, that's a boundary we're setting about how much we want others to be in our space and how much we allow them to show concern, and vice versa.
Absolutely. I think another very important thing that we need to highlight here when it comes to setting boundaries, that there is absolutely no such thing as entitlement. There is absolutely no such thing as because I'm your daughter, I will get this, or I'm your son. There is absolutely no such thing as because I'm your boss, you will do that. Absolutely no such thing. So we're looking at these relationships in every way. Another one is because I'm your mother.
Yes.
There's no such thing. It's like you're forcing someone to do something because you're throwing your title in their face, and that is absolutely incorrect. If you can please touch on those.
This is a very interesting one because the question I always like to ask is, if we get to that point where we have to remind someone about our position, our role, our title, our designation, whatever it is, so that we can get them to do something, what we're effectively doing is we're telling them that who we are is not important. What we stand for is the only thing that we can rely on. So we're effectively telling someone that just because of this association that you have with me, you need to respect the association. You don't have to respect me. And I'm not going to fulfill my responsibilities towards you. I'm only going to demand my rights from you. That's why I'm going to play on the fact that I'm your daughter, or I'm your son, or I'm your mother, or I'm your father. Because the respect, the innate respect that's supposed to exist between them is not there. So that's why they have to rely on obligation and guilt.
And guilt. Exactly. That's another important thing is a lot of moms feel, I'm not good enough, my son or daughter makes me feel guilty, or my spouse makes me feel guilty, or my family. And that's the easiest way to trap you, my sisters. That is the easiest way to trap you, because with us as women, yes, we do feel guilty. We have that maternal thing that, oh, shame. But you are being manipulated. That is the thing, that you are being manipulated. And you're going to explain to us, please, more examples from Quran and Hadith that explain to us of why boundaries are so important. Like a simple thing like, before you enter, even your boss's office, you don't just barge in. You will knock on the door and then walk in if you were given permission. A simple thing like when you're calling somebody to have a conversation, you may have this time to have this chat, but maybe that person is busy. So a simple thing is like, Assalamu alaikum, are you free to speak? We can't just assume the person is ready because they answered your phone. Maybe they answered your phone because it was making a noise, it was ringing.
Yes.
That sense that you are instant. Because I am ready, you must be ready. There's no such thing.
Now that you mention it, there's one hadith that comes to mind, and forgive me if I'm paraphrasing my understanding of the hadith. I'm not quoting it word for word, right? And it's the hadith that reminds us that a believer does not get bitten from the same hole twice. And if anything defines a boundary, that to me defines a boundary. That the first time you give someone the benefit of the doubt and you make yourself available. When they respond in a certain way, you need to understand where they're at, and you need to understand what you are willing to receive, so that the next time you engage with them, you adjust your expectation and you adjust the boundaries of what is acceptable and tolerable in that interaction, so that they don't get to take advantage of you a second time. That is a boundary. But we won't be able to do that if we are so fixated on their title and what we need from them and how it is that we want them to perceive us and all of those things. And to come back to your comment you made just now about how a lot of times we hear people say things like, they make me feel guilty, they make me feel upset, they anger me. There's no one that can make you feel anything without your permission.
Absolutely. It's how you perceive what is being said. If you lack that understanding, if you don't see the deeper thing behind it, that is your perception. Nobody makes you feel guilty. Nobody makes you feel upset. Nobody makes you feel angry. You do it to yourself because
Yes.
you're not seeing the bigger picture and understanding. And that for us as women, I must admit, and I'm going to say this on radio, is very difficult to do. It's a very difficult to swallow.
Why?
Honest confession.
Why is it so difficult for women? Why does it appear to be more difficult for women than for men?
Because women somehow, and I can't speak for everybody, so please, my beloved sisters, I'm not speaking for everyone, myself. Sometimes we have this thing that somehow, yes, as a mother, you have rights over your children, I understand. But when they are adults, let go. You did your duty. You laid the foundation. You taught them about Salah. You reminded them of Deen. You get them married. Then it's their own life. And that's where the difficulty comes. My son doesn't care about me anymore. My daughter doesn't worry about me anymore. It's not that. It's actually you being unfair and you're holding them back. Am I correct?
This is a very contentious point.
Yes.
It's a contentious
it's
point.
over one filled with guilt. But what are you supposed to do? Again, I'm your boss. You're supposed to. And even when we come
Yes.
to females in a leadership role, it's very difficult to have boundaries because again, you may not like the way your female boss speaks to you, but you'll keep quiet because you need the job.
Yes.
And that is not right. That's already an unhealthy environment, and you have no boundaries. So you're obviously going to be walked all over.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes down to your self-worth, right? If you don't value yourself, then you're going to allow other people to take advantage of you or to treat you badly. And you're going to be open to manipulation, and you're going to be open to people pulling rank on you and guilting you into doing things. The moment you recognize your self-worth, the moment you recognize your value, it makes it a lot easier for you to recognize where they're coming from, what they're trying to do, why it is that they're trying to do it in the way they're doing it. And then you can actually stand in your own space and with conviction in your own value system, you can then respond to them and prevent them from doing something that is not just harmful to you. And this is the important part. We shouldn't be wanting to set boundaries because we want to stop people from taking advantage of us only. That isn't the purpose of a boundary. If we go back to that hadith I quoted earlier about the believer wanting for their brother what they want for themselves, you must look at people's behavior towards you and also consider how that behavior of theirs might be harmful to them and their akhirah. And if you are genuinely, sincerely concerned about them in that regard, you will prevent them from doing something to you that is harmful to them, not just to you. Otherwise, you're being selfish.
Absolutely. That's a very, very pertinent point. Again, it brings me back to when we're setting initial boundaries. Like we said, respect yourself, set boundaries for yourself. So you're going to please share some examples with us, because the first thing to me that will come is a lot of things that we as women do, we feel we're doing it out of obligation. I have to do this because what will my husband say? I have to do this because what will my children think? I have to do this because what will my boss think? I have to do this because what will society think? And you're going to be driving yourself insane. You're going to land up with loads and loads of stress and unwanted illnesses. So if you can just guide our sisters that are listening now, healthy boundaries that you set for yourself, non-negotiable.
When we stop needing that validation from others about whether or not we're doing a good job in what we're trying to achieve, it makes it possible for us to set almost an internal standard that we want to adopt for ourselves. And allow me to explain. A lot of times we judge our own abilities and our own effectiveness at our role based on how other people respond to it, because we focus on whether they think we're good enough. Right? And that has its place. I'm not saying that we're going to be idealistic and assume that that never happens. But what's more important about it is that the way they respond to us shouldn't be about whether or not they approve. The way they respond to us should be information for us to determine whether or not what we were hoping to achieve with them, we were successful at. And if we weren't successful at it because we didn't get the response we were hoping for, rather than diminishing ourselves and beating ourselves up for not being good enough and all of those sorts of things, or assuming that they're just ungrateful or and treating us badly, what we should be doing is we should be reconsidering what it is that we're missing about the way we're trying to get across, so that we can improve ourselves in being more effective at achieving what we want to achieve with them. That way we own our contribution and we don't blame them for how we feel about ourselves.
Yes, yes. And the other thing is, the beauty you see in me is a reflection of you. The good you see in me is a reflection of you. So sometimes, obviously, in a world, you're going to meet so many different people. Some people, you just blend with, you just get along with, it just so happens. And other people are a bit different. It doesn't mean they're bad. They're just different. I mean, everybody's upbringing is different.
Yes.
Everybody's value system sometimes can be different. And obviously, everybody's boundaries are different. But the thing is that, you know what, you can only blame your parents for lack of boundaries till you're probably 14 or 15. By the time you're 18 or 21, you already have your own personality. You can make that change. The other thing is also, with all parents, I'm sure every parent obviously tries their best, and they're trying their best with what they had, what resources, whatever they had available at that time. But we all have a choice. If you didn't like something, whatever, nothing stopping us now from adults is changing it and having these healthy, good practices in the upbringing of our children moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a very important point that resonates with the example you gave earlier about that parent that went to the Molana, I think it was, to complain about their son's behavior. There's two things we forget. The one is that our children didn't raise themselves. As much as this is a bitter pill to swallow, if we see anything untoward in our children's behavior, we need to first consider what it is that we did in their upbringing that didn't establish the values in them that we want to see in them.
Yeah.
Right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that before we go and beat ourselves up if we didn't get it right, we need to understand what other influences we were competing with that we didn't realize at the time that has now resulted in this outcome. And then the third thing, which is even more important, and something I remind parents about all the time, is that your job as a parent doesn't end when your son or daughter gets married. You will always be their parent because you will always be a life stage ahead of them. And they will always be experiencing their life stage for the first time. So, when your child behaves in a way that is untoward, that is unhealthy, that is call it even abusive or disrespectful or whatever it is, or neglectful even, rather than taking offense and withdrawing from that space and making it someone else's problem now because their partner must sort it out with them or their in-laws must sort it out with them, that's not the way we're supposed to respond. Part of those healthy boundaries is to understand that we don't ever remove ourselves as parents from our children's lives, but we also don't impose ourselves on them as if they are always children. And striking that balance cannot happen if we are self-loathing or we are feeling inadequate in who we are. That's why healthy self-esteem is the core of every healthy relationship.
Now, the next question is going to come. I spoke to my son or I spoke to my daughter or whatever, but they don't listen to me. They adults now, they tell me that they're not a child. I mustn't tell them what to do. Very, very common complaint.
Right. And what does that confirm? It confirms that we spent our entire life instructing them rather than living with them, rather than experiencing and teaching them through engagement and involvement in their life. And we just, one of the biggest problems we've got, especially in our community, more than anything else, is that we focus so much on discipline and compliance and conformance and right and wrong that we lose sight of the human. So we don't connect as humans anymore. We don't connect as father and son or mother and daughter or anything of that sort. What we connect with is as parent and child. And then we lose sight of the human, and when the human struggles, that's when they behave badly. So when they eventually grow up and they leave the nest, so to speak, the reason why they would find it okay or acceptable to tell us that we can't tell them what to do anymore is because their experience of our parenting up until that point was always about you will do or else. And once that or else is no longer possible, they're going to take liberties.
Definitely. Maybe you could just share examples with us, of, upbringing where there were unhealthy boundaries. I mean, one of them that I already gave you was the story where the parent approached the Malana and he said, but he was with you for 20-something years and you couldn't get it right. So maybe some more examples, please.
Another a common example would be how it is that we place an excessive emphasis on doing the right thing, but we make it we emphasize that doing the right thing from a discipline and from an acceptability perspective. If you don't do it, there will be consequences. If you don't do it, you will get punished. If you don't do it, you're going to go to Jahannam, right? That's usually how we try to give them reason to do the right thing. And in the process, at no point in time did we stop to consider whether they understand and truly embrace the value of doing the right thing.
Exactly.
So,
like I'm teaching you this so you can be a better person. I'm teaching you this. So this is a life skill that will empower you for the rest of your life. We don't
beyond that, we need to teach them how it is that their sense of self, their dignity, their self-respect, their self-worth, their relationship with Allah and everything else, we need to get them to connect in a meaningful way how it is that doing that right thing actually strengthens all of that. You see, there's not a single person that behaves badly if they don't feel appreciated. Right? If they feel appreciated, they will behave in the best way possible. The moment they feel unappreciated, they behave badly. Because behaving badly is our way of demanding significance after we feel we've been taken for granted. Now, take that and apply it to the parent-child relationship and the boundaries and everything else. And when someone transgresses the boundaries that we establish with them, that's when we feel as if they're taking us for granted. Meanwhile, we didn't stop to consider that maybe they didn't quite have reason to take that boundary seriously because we presented the boundary as if it was optional.
Another very important point I have to bring across, and it's sadly that it's still here in our community, the treatment of sons, which is different to the treatment of daughters, which again in this day and age is 2022. And the other thing is we know about Deen, we know about Hadith, we know about Quran, we know about Sharia, and sadly sometimes this is still happening. Sometimes sons are very mollycoddled and daughters are expected to do X, Y, and Z in the home. And then the other places where daughters can be very, very mollycoddled, and then when they get married and they grow older, they don't know what to do. They're struggling, they're battling. And yet we don't realize that empowering your sons in the kitchen and to do household chores, my beloved sisters, is a sunnah of our beloved Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There's no such thing. Boys can't cook, boys can't clean house, boys can't do washing, boys can't do this. No such thing. And the same thing when it comes to women. Also, to have her partner help her do things at home, her husband, it's a sunnah of our beloved Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. For me, I think enough said.
I mean, so here's the thing about this whole gender bias and the roles and the way we stigmatize certain tasks or chores and activities for different genders. The moment we do that, we create exactly what it is that we don't want, which is the entitlement factor. We again reinforce the fact that because you are of a certain disposition, a certain makeup, you are entitled to certain things. Meanwhile, Islam is clear. You don't have any right to claim without there being an equal responsibility to return. And when it comes to sharing roles and doing things that appear to be, this whole thing about cooking is always something that I find quite funny. If you ask a man generally, and I'm not saying all men are like this, and I'm not saying all women are like this either, right? But generally, if you ask a man about cooking in the house, they'll tell you how it's the woman's job. But ask a man,
men still say that.
right? But ask a man who are the best cooks in the world, and they'll always tell you it's men.
I mean, how contradictory is that? Exactly.
Right.
And more than anything, we're striving to be good Muslims, and by doing this, obviously, we want to emulate our beloved Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So again, like I said, where is this? I don't know if I can say backward, but can I say where is this clouded thinking coming from?
It's coming from a space of not connecting with the value of what we do. So here's the thing, right? I always believe, and this might sound idealistic, but just give this. Let's unpack this for a few minutes. If you truly appreciate something, you're going to nurture it and try and use it to best effect. You're going to want to gain the most value out of it, right? You're not going to want to set it aside and take it for granted or just keep it for just in case. You're going to want to get the benefit out of it because you appreciate the value that it has. So, when we have an ability to do something, like for example, cleaning or cooking or mending our clothes or whatever it is, when we have the ability to do it, but we don't do it because we think it's not fitting for us to do it, someone else is supposed to do it. What are we saying about that ability to be able to do it? We don't appreciate it. Now, if you don't appreciate your ability to do something, firstly, you're not connecting with the value of being able to do it. And secondly, where did you get that ability from? From Allah. So where's the ingratitude actually directed at?
Thank you so much, Astem. Yes.
So, what does Allah tell us in the Quran? That if you are grateful, I will increase you.
Yes.
If we are grateful for the abilities that Allah has given us, and we use it to full effect because we are capable of creating value out of the abilities that Allah has created us with, then Allah will increase us in the value and the benefit and the barakah of those efforts, because that's the natural outcome of gratitude. The moment we restrain ourselves from creating good because we believe we're entitled not to have to do it, because we see it beneath ourselves and everything else, that's where we start slipping. And when you don't, anyone knows, if you neglect something, it deteriorates and it erodes, it rots, it falls away.
And the important part is that your behavior, your children are watching you. Like, I always say that children learn more from what we do than what we say. So if you're going to react in a certain way, your child can do the exact same thing to you. And then you're going to wonder, but the child so rude. No.
Absolutely.
Stop marrying your behavior. Which brings me to the next very, very important comment, or basically statement, that needs to be made. That, when it comes to setting boundaries, at what point can you set boundaries without sounding like you are controlling? Because in the fact is, you're not setting a boundary to control other people. You're setting a boundary to give value to who you are as a person. You're setting a boundary that this is acceptable and this is non-negotiable. But nobody wants to be in any environment where you are literally feeling sick, where you're regretting being there, where you can't wait to leave, where you don't want to be in, whether, like I said, again, you don't want to be in any space that makes you uncomfortable. So these boundaries are healthy in a sense that it could be in a work environment, like I said, in all the different examples I gave, in any relationship also. Relationships must be healthy, it must be free, it must be full of love, it must be expressed naturally, nothing with manipulation and demands and, delusions of grandeur and entitlement. It needs to be with mutual respect, more so for the other person and for yourself. And you have to tell yourself that I am setting this boundary to maintain peaceful and healthy relationships that will please Allah first.
Yes. More important than pleasing Allah, it's because we want to honor what Allah has created.
Absolutely.
And that's the part that links back again to our self-worth. If you don't honor yourself, you'll have no reason to conduct yourself with dignity or to claim your dignity in the face of other one treating you in an undignified way. So, again, the only reason we allow people to treat us badly, or the only reason why we find it difficult to challenge unhealthy behavior, is because of how we feel about ourselves, not because of who they are.
Definitely. How should a boundary be communicated to other parties in a manner that is respectable and in a manner that the other parties understand that you are not being difficult, you are not being arrogant, you are basically doing what Allah said is fine. Allah, to create muhabbat.
Yes. The only answer that comes to mind for that is something that I have to remind myself about often as well. And that is that in every moment that challenges you, you need to ask yourself one very important question. And that question is, who do you want to be in that moment? Not what do you feel you have to do and how do you want others to perceive you or anything. Who do you want to be? And if you understand who you want to be, then regardless of how volatile or how angry or raging the other person might be towards you or how they might be treating you, you won't allow yourself to slip. You won't allow yourself to become part of the problem because you want to fight fire with fire. That old fighting fire with fire it's misleading. You don't do that, because all you do is you escalate the bad when you do that, because a negative times a negative is always a bigger negative. It's never ever a positive.
Absolutely.
So who do you want to be? Who do you want to be in that moment when someone is challenging you or treating you badly or taking you for granted? Do you want to be someone that is going to play to that and now start screaming and losing yourself and losing your self-respect and losing your dignity because you're trying to get a point across to them so desperately? Or do you step back, recognize why it is that they, in that moment, are incapable of being better than that, and finding it within yourself to create space to help them get into a better space?
Okay, now I'm going to play good cop, bad cop here, right? So I'm going to put you in situations. You know me, when you and I do interviews together, you know. So this is what we're going to do now. I'm going to put you in various situations, and you're going to give us examples of how to maintain a healthy boundary. So, how do you maintain healthy boundaries in the workplace? Because a lot of stress comes from the workplace, in all reality, in all honesty. And people will say, leave your problems at home and you come to the door, you need to focus on work. Your problems are part of who you are. Yes, you need to remain focused at work and that, but you're going to have good days and bad days. So how do we maintain healthy boundaries in the workplace?
Okay, in the workplace, we need to understand the difference between professionalism and enabling bad behavior. Where we are treated poorly in ways that is just unjustified and unacceptable, and we remain quiet because we are afraid of losing our job or not getting that bonus or incentive or whatever it is, then we need to understand what we're saying about ourselves. We're saying that that bonus or whatever it is that we're afraid of losing is more valuable than who we are. And that's again a reflection of self-worth. Now, how we go about challenging that behavior doesn't have to be confrontational. And that's why we find it difficult to establish healthy boundaries in the workplace, because we think that we either need to submit or we need to confront. There's a whole lot of options in between that we can look at. Part of it, yeah, and part of that is about just understanding what is a fireable offense, because you don't want to go and put yourself in harm's way for nothing.
Of course. Punching your boss lady is not going to help, huh? That's not going to help.
Absolutely not.
Just in case you were thinking it's not going to help, you will end up in jail.
But it reminds me of a hadith that I heard once that says something to the effect that Shaitan will threaten you with poverty to convince you to do something that is haram. And that is something that holds true in the workplace more often than not. And understand that when you're in the workplace, you're working in someone else's power structure. So you need to be really grounded in who you are so that you can navigate that power structure without challenging the power structure, so that you're focused on the issue at hand and not on the people involved or the authorities involved. You don't want to go disrupting hierarchies when that isn't the real goal. The real goal is, what is the benefit, what is the value that you're trying to achieve, so that your role is effective, and also so that you don't have to enable behavior or transactions in the business space that will contaminate your iman.
Exactly, and maintaining a healthy environment. Now the big one, the very big one, when it comes to boundaries in relationships. And I want to talk about marriages. Now, we have to face reality. Divorce is so common in our time right now. Yeah. It's a reality. If people don't even get shocked anymore. For whatever reasons, a couple are not together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. It is not our place to find out. It's not our business to find out who said this, who said that, whatever. It is between the couple, and Allah has guided them to make this decision, and that's the end of it. It's nobody's business. But the boundaries need to be set in how that ex-wife or husband will be treated if there are children involved. Remember, obviously, if there are no children involved, you go your way, I go my way, alhamdulillah, we wish each other good. But obviously, if there are children involved, then there has to be boundaries. There also has to be mutual respect. I mean, you divorced the person, but you didn't divorce your role as a parent. So obviously, when the children are younger, there will be much more interaction because the kids are younger. When the kids are adults, it's a whole different ballgame. But that boundary, at which point are you crossing the line? So I'm basically focusing now on when there's a divorce. How do you maintain healthy boundaries? So there's still respect from either spouse for the sake of the children.
Okay, this is a difficult one for a couple of reasons. But the one thing we need to remember is that in 99% of the divorces, the reason they get to that point is because there was an erosion of respect and understanding between the couple.
Yes. Yes.
Now, here's the thing. If you have children, and this applies even if you don't have children, but let's just focus on the scenario where you have children. If you have children and you are unable to resolve those problems before divorce, I assure you with absolute certainty that you will continue to have to deal with that problem until it is resolved after divorce. Only problem is after divorce it becomes 10 times more difficult to resolve it because you don't have a vested interest to your partner any longer. So if you want to establish healthy boundaries and you try to do that after divorce, firstly, those same boundaries that you're trying to establish after divorce are the same boundaries that would have helped your relationship to avoid divorce in the first place if you had found a way to establish it before divorce. That's the one thing. The other thing is that the moment, and we see this all the time, the moment one partner tries to establish a boundary with the other partner for whatever reason, it becomes a power struggle. And it becomes a power struggle because, again, you've got two people who feel personally offended and attacked and undermined and taken for granted and betrayed, needing to now have to listen to and toe the line as dictated by their opposing partner, the partner that they couldn't make a life with.
Yeah.
And expecting that to go reasonably well is just naive at best. So we need to understand what we're dealing with when it comes to that. And part of establishing healthy boundaries, a critical point is that we need to understand what is our credibility with the other person. Sorry, excuse me. Our credibility with the other person that we're trying to establish a boundary with. Because if we don't have that credibility, it might not even be through any fault of our own. But if they just don't respect our role and our standing in that scenario, any effort to establish a boundary is going to come across as antagonistic or confrontational.
Definitely.
So we need to understand what is our credibility, and if our credibility is not where it needs to be, we need to understand why they don't respect our role and then work towards remedying that before we can go and start setting down rules and regulations and all sorts of things, because the next thing that happens is, don't speak to me, speak to my lawyer.
Absolutely. And the thing is that you are divorced now, so you can't expect the same level of respect you had when you were married. And clearly, like you said, that respect got eroded hence you are divorced. But very important point still coming up. We're going to take a short ad break. Please don't go away. Sure. An amazing, a deep, a much needed conversation today. A much needed topic. Mashallah, I'm just going through my WhatsApp messages. Anyway, I've been inundated with positive feedback about today's show with Zaid Ismail, author, life coach. And we're talking about the importance of setting boundaries. And now the big one, because a lot of people are asking me about this. So I have a lot of ladies who, have remarried. So they have either married men whose wives have passed on. So they have married, widowers who have children. And they complain that I don't have any boundaries in that home because, with all due respect, I feel like I'm competing with a ghost. I am being compared to the mother, and the mother is my home, and I am my own person, and I am struggling. I do not know how to set healthy boundaries. The other one is when you marry a man who has children, and now you are part of a blended family. Now, with a blended family, There are times where you can have your own children and marry a man who has his own children, and there has to be boundaries there. That's the one scenario. There could be another scenario where you can have children and marry a man who's never had children, or the other one where you have had no children and you marry a man who has children. So lots of different scenarios. But I think the important part is the rule will still be the same in every scenario. Set healthy boundaries to maintain healthy relationships, to create muhabbat in family, and to make sure you lead a life that will firstly please Allah, and you will have respect for each other. Make sense?
Yeah.
So Zaid, take it away.
Okay. First of all,
competing with the ghost, that's heavy. That is heavy.
Yes, competing with a ghost is extremely difficult. But the fact that you feel a need to compete with a ghost is the problem.
Yes.
But we'll come back to that in a second. The point I want to make that first came to mind when you mentioned all of these scenarios is this. When you get married to someone who has children from a previous marriage, and that marriage of theirs ended because it was in divorce, because obviously there was things that made it irreconcilable to the couple at the time. You need to understand that the children of that marriage are children that were exposed to an unhealthy relationship. So to expect those children to now behave in a way that is relative to children that were raised in a healthy, wholesome environment is somewhat unfair to the children. Because we need to understand what we're getting ourselves into. And this applies in more ways than just this scenario. It also applies in the case of becoming a second wife, for example. That's another very contentious issue.
That's a whole other one. Yes,
right?
Setting boundaries there as well.
And there's also setting boundaries there as well. We need to understand what it is that we're getting into. And if we're not in a healthy self-worth space, what will happen is that we'll hope that we are enough for our partner to want to give us the due respect and understanding and time and priority that we believe we are good enough for, relative to everything else that's being demanded of them in the rest of their life. And the moment we do that, we're not seeing our partner for who they are, we're not seeing them for the struggles that they're experiencing, and we're not seeing reality for what it is. We're being idealistic and we're entitled because of the role that we think we play in their life. Now, when it comes to children, again, if ever there's a time to recognize that we must want for others what we want for ourselves, it's when we deal with children, especially children from problematic relationships. Because no one behaves badly if they have the capacity to be better than that. And children that behave badly are struggling for significance because and I hate to use the term because we use this term often enough, the broken home syndrome. The fact that they're already dealing with that rejection, that betrayal, because their parents are no longer together and them as children were not good enough for their parents to want to work it out, and all of these horrible dynamics that play out in the case of divorce. All of that is very real and at play. And it doesn't matter how old the person is or how old the child is. You need to recognize who you're dealing with. You need to recognize that just because someone might be in their 20s doesn't mean that emotionally they're fully developed. And that is why you end up with children who are adults that continue to leverage their parent for their benefit, because they can guilt them, they can make them feel obligated, they can make them feel as if they didn't do enough for them in their life and it was their responsibility for why it is that the child's life is not the way it should have been now, and all of those sorts of things. The moment we start resorting to that kind of behavior, we must understand that the emotional maturity of the people we're dealing with is not relative to their age, it's relative to their experience as children.
Maturity, definitely. But the other question will come that again with parents, because now they're going to be put on this guilt trip. Their marriage didn't work, it was between them and Allah. Now for having children, play them up against each other, because a lot of young children do that. I mean, as an educator, I see it all the time. And also as a coach, I see that even with adult children. But the thing is, you cannot hold your parents responsible for inadequacies in your life. Things didn't work out in their marriage, and by them divorcing, they're actually teaching you that you don't need to be seeing this. The benchmark for a healthy relationship obviously wasn't there. So for how long would children in that instance blame their parents for their own mistakes? Because I mean, the thing is that when you grow up and you get married, you're going to try and want to do things differently. You don't want to let history repeat itself.
Here's the thing. Children will always polarize towards the adult that is more emotionally available. Emotionally available. Not the one that gives them the biggest gifts, or the one that spoils them more, or the one that has less boundaries. The one that is more emotionally available, because it's the emotional security that they're looking for. And children will play the adults against each other when they have reason to believe that who they are as a child in that setting is not enough to be significant. So then it comes across as if they are being manipulative. Meanwhile, they're not being manipulative. They're just playing by the rules that the adults have set. The boundaries that the adults have set, children will find the gaps and they will find ways to navigate those boundaries. And the thing is, I'm not being idealistic. We acknowledge that you're not always, in fact, very often you're going to get people that are in a relationship where one is committed to the relationship working and the other one is committed to pointing out everything that's wrong with the relationship.
Yeah.
When that happens, if your self-worth is not in a healthy space, you will lose yourself to that relationship and you will lose your relationship with your children in the process.
Another pertinent point. So at what point in time will the cycle break? Because if there are going to be children, which is a fact, again, you deal with the public, you deal with children, I deal with children. At which point in time are we going to break the cycle and say, for me now, yes, I came from a home where these were the issues. I mean, let's face it, every child has experienced some trauma in their lives growing up. I mean, no couple has the perfect relationship. That you've seen in fairy tales. Let's be realistic.
Yes.
But the thing is also when we're setting boundaries, right? At what point in your life do you say that, listen, I'm going to stop playing the manipulation game. I'm going to stop saying, I need this, I need this. At what point in time do you now, as an adult, say, you know what, I'm not going to let history repeat itself. I am now in my marriage, or I am now a parent, I am this. How am I going to make things work for me and my husband? What happened with my parents, that's different. If my mom passed on, that's different. If my dad passed on, that's different. If my mom was a single parent, that's different. It's not me. It's not me. I'm not going to mirror that behavior.
One of the most disheartening trends that I've witnessed is where children who grow up in homes like that swear that they would never ever want to be like that, and they end up being exactly like that. And you know why? It's because they don't know how to be anything else. So despite their best efforts emotionally, they are still a product of that environment. Now when it comes to the manipulation side of it, and where adults are still practicing this manipulative type of behavior, the one thing we need to consider is whether they are deliberately, with malicious intent, being manipulative, or are they manipulating because they are insecure about who they are, so they believe that the only way they're going to get what they need is if they play the field the way it needs to be played. Focus on the insecurity and you start focusing on the root cause. Focus on the manipulative behavior, you focus on judgment, and you start isolating people.
Definitely. And unfortunately, we only have 3 minutes left. We have 2 minutes. So let's, give our beloved sisters, the rainbow, or the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There is help out there. Go for counseling. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Speak to a life coach. Speak to your local island. Speak to someone that you trust that is not related to you. Speak to a total stranger who is not related to you, that is equipped, that has knowledge on how to assist you. Speaking to somebody you know is not going to help you. That person, as much as they try to assist you, they're going to be subjective. I'm sure that you can attest to that, because if you're going to carry all of this with you, you're going to repeat this behavior in your relationships moving forward, and that's not going to be healthy for anybody.
My advice to married couples, and especially to newlyweds as well, has always been this. When you experience any upheaval or any disruption in your relationship, your focus should be on trying to understand your partner better, not trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. And when you're trying to understand someone, if you're having a problem, say for example, if the wife is having a problem with her husband, she doesn't go and speak to her family about her husband because she's trying to understand him. Her family doesn't know him. His family knows him. So she needs to have an established good relationship with people that are trusted advisors from his side of the family, so that when they're trying to seek understanding, they look to understand each other better, not trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. Because if you go to your own family, your family by loyalty and by their own sincere efforts are going to want to protect you. They're gonna think they're protecting you from this bad behavior of your partner. No one's going to take advantage of our daughter or our son, right? And with good intention, they actually create the bigger problem. So when you're in a relationship with anyone, once you are married, please ensure that you develop healthy relationships with the extended family from both sides, so that you can trust people to be to be sincere in how it is that they provide you with insight and guidance, so that you can understand your partner better, rather than trying to judge your partner for not being good enough.
That should also be mutual respect. That is very,
Absolutely.
very, very, very important. If you can, in the next few seconds, 10 seconds, I'll give you a minute. My sound engineer, can I please give Zaid a minute? 1 minute. Your final words when it comes to setting healthy boundaries.
When it comes to setting healthy boundaries, if you're not if your self-worth is not where it needs to be, you're going to expect other people to treat you a certain way, assuming that they are capable of it. That's one of the biggest challenges we've got. We assume that others are capable of being better than who they are. That's why we feel betrayed when they don't show up the way we need them to. What we need to do is we need to recognize that people, just like us, they're struggling with their own demons as well. So when someone behaves badly, we need to understand what they're struggling with, rather than assuming that they're just not behaving well enough because we're not important enough to them.
May Almighty reward you in abundance for educating and empowering everyone who's blessed to know you. May Allah accept your du'as, and please remember myself, my sound engineer Hamid, and everybody here at ISM in your du'as during these Mubarak days. May Allah accept all your du'as and your efforts, inshallah.
Inshallah. Ameen. Ameen.
Ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khairan, Zaid Ismail. To my beloved sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your beneficial du'as. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make easy your affairs. Remember, these are Mubarak days, the days of Dhul Hajj. Please remember us in your du'as. Remember the ISM team in your du'as. And until we speak again, Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.